Hi guys, it's Miss Ash here, and I'm going to go through task 1, part 3 over absolute dating. So we're going to kind of talk through that. You should have handout GT4, and before you do anything, you need to pause because you need to do this review activity before you start anything. So pause this video, do that review, and then come on back, and we will talk about absolute dating. So absolute dating is slightly different from relative dating. With relative dating, what we do is we compare the ages kind of based on events. Absolute dating, like the name would imply, gets a little bit more specific. So it's going to look at more specific things and say, this is the age range of this rock. It's not ever, neither absolute or relative, neither one of them. We can't pick up this rock and say, this rock is 5,432 years old. No type of dating that we do can do that, but absolute dating kind of gets into more of a year zone than relative dating does. So that's kind of the big difference. What we do whenever we do this, we can look at tree rings, we can look at varves, we can look at radioactive isotopes, and we can do carbon dating. So with tree rings, I'm sure you guys have all seen tree rings before. We've kind of talked about those ever since elementary school. Scientists can look at tree rings, and every ring is a new year, and they're able to gather information about those rings. If it's a thick ring, that means that there was a lot of growing that happened that year. So it happened when there was lots of rain, lots of water. It was a really good year. When they're thin rings, that's more of our times of drought, stuff like that. But they can always see when those start, and they can start to count and say, oh, this tree was years old based on the number of rings that it is. The next one that we have is varves. And varves, if you think about tree rings and move them into rocks, that's a lot of what varves are going to be. So varves are layers of light and dark sediment. We see these in areas where we've had glacier deposits. So the glacier comes in the springtime, that glacier starts to melt, and as it melts, it drops sediments, then it recedes back. Wintertime, it comes back in, and we change that way. Where we have our dark layers are layers where it was springtime and we drop those sediments. So we drop that sediment down, and that's where we can tell. So the varve is really kind of like the tree ring of the rock world. And then next, and this is probably the big one, are radioactive isotopes and carbon dating. And with these, what scientists do is all of our elements start to break down over time. And they have a specific half-life that they go through. And geologists and chemists are able to look at that carbon that exists in rock because of fossils and because of exchanges of carbon dioxide within the atmosphere. They're able to look at that carbon and see how broken down it is, and they're able to age the rock that way. Now, radioactive and carbon dating is only good for about 60,000 years. So if you think about the scale of geologic time, it's really just a little tiny fraction of how old some of our rocks can be. But if they're newer rocks or younger rocks, we can do this. We also date everything to present. Present with this is 1950. So we date everything to present using that kind of dating. Now, you're done with that. It was pretty quick and pretty easy because relative dating is really more of our focus, but we do want you to be aware of absolute dating. So what you need to do now, flip your paper over to the back, and there's a compare and contrast chart that compares and contrasts relative and absolute dating. It asks for some specific questions about each. I will tell you for your relative dating, you're going to have to go back to your other two handouts to pull that information, just like you probably had to do on your review on the front. So with your relative dating, you're going to have to go back to that. Also, make sure on your relative dating that on your pick ones of these to explain, on those two sections, don't do the same thing that you did on the front, because you need to make sure that you've got, different sets of information. But that's kind of your review to wrap it all up. When you finish this, bring it up to me so that I can check over it, and then you'll be able to move on.